Thanks everyone for joining today's webinar on sales tax changes in 2022, presented by both Avalara and Smarter Commerce. Appreciate everybody joining the webinar today. Today we're going to focus really on what sales tax changes and how that might provide implications to companies running JD Edwards. So appreciate the opportunity. A few quick introductions with the panels that we have involved in today's webinar. We have Jerry Van Dalen, Senior Sales Executive at Smarter Commerce. Jerry has been with the Smarter Commerce team for over 5 years and really works with clients to manage multiple just sales channels within JD Edwards and streamline that approach. So appreciate Jerry for joining. We're also joined by Diego Fernandez. Diego has 25 plus years of experience working with JD Edwards customers, specifically managing really the order to cash process in which sales tax and tax implications can come in. And he's going to be really taking us through a solution demonstration towards the middle of our webinar today. So thank them for both joining today's webinar. I'll be your host. My name is Matt Hill. I have over 7 years experience here at Avalara, specialize in working with JD Edwards clients. So appreciate the opportunity for everyone joining today. So as we can jump in today's agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about really the increased obligations when it comes to e-commerce and what implications that has for customers such as yourselves as you're growing and what sales tax implications that is. We'll talk a little bit about in the COVID situation, we have various remote workforces in place and what implications that have by having individuals in different states and what tax obligations you may have. We'll talk a little bit about kind of the impact of supply chain and labor shortages. As we get in towards the middle of our webinar, we're really going to talk about where tax automation can remove that burden. So there's obvious complexity around managing sales and use tax today. And with these new regulatory requirements, it increases the burden that companies have. And so how can they leverage technology to really streamline that process? And then we're going to really walk through a sample solution demonstration showing from JD Edwards connected to Avalara how that can work. So we've got a packed agenda, should be about 40 minutes, 45 minutes or so. What we will encourage is if you do have questions throughout the webinar, there's an online chat. We'll be answering those questions throughout the webinar. So feel free to submit your questions and Jerry, myself, or Diego will be responding to those questions. We'll also have some time at the end to address some of those questions as well. So thanks everybody for joining and let's jump into it. So the state of e-commerce, one of the key things as we've seen many manufacturers, distributors, and wholesalers in today's environment with the advent of COVID are really trying to get their products and services out directly to their customers. And so we've seen over the past several years an increase in clients that are really reaching out via different sales channels, and e-commerce is one of those. And so you'll see at the end, 96% of mid-sized businesses have changed as a result to COVID-19. So their clients are actually adapting and changing how they're getting their products and services out, and e-commerce is a transition to do that. So obviously, 1.3 trillion in sales from Q2 of 2021. That's the highest year-over-year growth we've seen in e-commerce. So we can see a huge surge as businesses look to expand their sales models and their sales channels to support e-commerce as well. And so with that, obviously, there's new tax obligations that are associated with e-commerce. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about Nexus and economic Nexus and what some of these new tax obligations and how they impact your organization. So I think that the big thing that many companies think about is, traditionally they have a physical presence in a certain state and they've only had to register in those states. Well, with the advent of Wayfair and Economic Nexus, that obligation has changed. So 45 of the 50 states now have some type of economic nexus law, which ultimately means if you trigger those thresholds, you're required to register, collect sales tax or manage exemptions in those states, and ultimately file returns. So it's created a bigger burden for clients to go through that. So let's jump into that and see just a quick sample of some of those states and some of those new laws. I think the first thing that comes to mind, and when we speak with JD Edwards customers, is traditionally they say, well, I don't really sell e-commerce. I sell through my wholesale and distribution. Well, the states really look at that and say, hey, they've got both economic nexus thresholds as well as transaction thresholds. And then the third piece of that is the product taxable or exempt? And so many states have saying, we want gross sales, whether or not they're taxable or exempt transactions, those still trigger those economic nexus thresholds. So you can see, obviously here in California, Texas, New York, it's a straight dollar threshold if you do a certain amount of business. So if you were located in Kansas and effectively you're selling into the state of California, if you exceed that 500,000 threshold, you would be required to register. And these laws are constantly changing. So one of the key things, you'll see the blue shaded states, most companies say, well, I sell widgets or small dollar value, I'm not going to hit that dollar threshold. Well, those states have instituted both an economic nexus threshold and a revenue, but as well as a transaction threshold. And these rules constantly change. And so one of the things as Avalara does, we try to keep up to date with all these changes and provide resources to clients to do risk assessments. So you can go on our website and see all these changes by state and how they may impact your organization. So why is this important? And I mentioned it earlier, really it was the landmark case in 2018. You've probably all heard of it or understand some of it, and that's Wayfair versus South Dakota. And it really took precedence, is that physical presence is no longer part of it. So it's not the only requirement. We're now looking at how much I sell into that state, whether it's taxable or exempt, how many transactions I do in that state. And so customers now need to determine where they need to start collecting sales tax. And that can be a burden to have to maintain and manage that. Many states traditionally or many companies were maybe only in 3 or 4 states, which you can manage tax obligations and returns filing. But as that goes from 4 or 5 states to 25 states, that burden from your finance team can be much larger. And so ensuring that you're up to date and making sure you're calculating tax where you should, registered where you should, is really the advent of this new legislation that's out there. One of the things I often hear is from clients is, well, I've triggered Nexus, for 1 year, but that was a one-off sale, and can I register and deregister throughout the process? The answer to that is it depends, and there's rules associated with that. So typically, you can see in the third bullet point, states have this concept known as trailing nexus. And so they're looking at the last weeks, months, or it can even be more than a year. So nexus is really an obligation. Once you turn it on, you are now notifying to the state, hey, I am a taxpayer, I'm registered, I'm collecting tax, and I'm remitting tax in that state. And so it's not something that a switch that you can easily turn on and off. But there are certain situations where, hey, if you've made sales into a state, you no longer have that customer and you're registered in that state, you can deregister. But the rules vary between states on the process around that. So just a key comment around, turning on and off Nexus as part of your process. The other key thing that we've seen, and especially with the advent of COVID, is a remote workforce. And that being, you've now got individuals and employees that reside in different states that are doing business on your behalf. And so this concept of physical nexus is still in play. So states have eased certain regulatory requirements around what is establishing nexus based upon an employee. Those vary state by state, but traditional definitions around physical presence is if you had an employee that's doing business, that's conducting business in that state on your behalf, that typically triggers nexus. And so we would encourage you to consult a tax professional to determine if those are, but we can give you guidance here at Avalara as well. So one of the things why are we doing all of this, right? Is the state going to come after us? Is there risk associated with, these new Nexus requirements? And as a technology provider of tax compliance here at Avalara, we often get asked, what is the likelihood of a state coming after us? Well, what we have seen over the past 2 years is more and more states have deployed virtual auditors. So historically, they would be on site at your location for a couple of weeks doing assessment on your business. What we have seen with COVID now is these audits are really going virtual. So what that ultimately means is they're no longer having to require to travel, but they can audit your business from afar. So they're able to do more audits as one individual. And so I think businesses just need to be prepared to be able to share their information electronically as part of that process. And so, key to this. So kind of the concept of tax, we don't want to scare you, but today is really an opportunity to also learn how automation can help leverage some of that burden. And that's where Avalara as a technology provider in conjunction with our partners at Smarter Commerce come in. And really there's 5 key aspects to automating tax compliance. And so to walk through this, one is accuracy, right? Making sure that we're calculating the right tax at the right jurisdiction for the right customer and making sure it's done correctly. Second is efficiency, right? So, traditionally rates and product taxability rules are maintained within your ERP system. Those rates change. And so you're needing to now constantly keep up with those rates. And again, to my previous example, if you were in 3 or 4 states, pretty easy to do. But as your Nexus footprint expands, now we're keeping up to date with rates and rules in multiple jurisdictions, and it can become a burden to be able to scale. Secondly, and thirdly is customer satisfaction. So obviously customers are key for us to do business. And so you want to make sure you're taxing your customers correctly. And so making sure the tax is correct, the rates are correct, that you're managing the right exemptions associated with that. So ensuring that customers have a great experience in purchasing from you. Risk management. So ultimately, we want to be able to decrease your company's risk around automating that process. So we shared some of those new regulatory requirements. How can we ensure that we keep off of an auditor's watch list to make sure we're doing it correctly and we're filing and registered where appropriate? And then the last is business growth. So one of the key things that clients look for is how can I scale my organization? And what I mean by scale and grow, as I'm growing and selling in new channels, I want to ensure that this tax piece doesn't prohibit me from doing that. So by having technology and automation in place, it allows you to streamline, instead of adding people and bodies to your finance to maintain all these new regulatory requirements, leveraging technology to be able to do so. So how does Avalara do that? And really it's through our tax compliance cloud. And so Avalara, from calculation and determination, through filing of the returns and outsourcing the returns process, through documentation and document management and managing exemptions, business licenses and state registrations, fiscal representation potentially in new countries as you expand, and really tax research to give you insights into these new rules. So we've created this compliance cloud that supports all of those different channels of tax compliance. In addition, obviously it has a verified and validated integration with Oracle and our JDE connector. So how does that work? So ultimately, you'll see the orange box here in the middle, and I think diagrams are important. We're going to show how the solution works here in just a moment. But this is where you manage your tax profile, the states that you need to register, the returns in which you need to file. And the way that the validated integration with JD Edwards works is upon sales order or generation of an invoice, it's basically making a real-time call to Avalara's cloud-based tax engine. And what it's requesting is 3 pieces of information: where you're selling, what you're selling, and who you're selling it to. And so I'll break that down. The where you sell will determine the address in which I'm shipping that product or service to, and it will understand, hey, do I have an obligation to collect tax in this state? Yes or no. It also passes address level information. And I know Diego is going to focus in on this in the solution demonstration, but this is fundamental because taxing jurisdictions, and most people think of zip codes, they often overlap and intersect. So part of Avalara's solution is validating addresses based upon a US postal database, and then taking that address and actually converting it to lat long coordinates. Just like somebody sends a pin on your phone, we take that and we drop that into the jurisdictional boundary map to make sure we're calculating tax in the right location. Second is what you sell. So the product and service that you're selling can have various degrees of taxability based upon state. So if I sell software or technology versus I'm providing services or equipment, all of those products and services can have various degrees of taxability by state. And the third piece is who I'm selling to. Specifically in the JD Edwards ecosystem, we recognize many of the things that you sell to wholesalers or distributors can be exempt. So making sure that you've got a valid exemption certificate on file for that customer based upon that ship to location will be key. So that's what we're going to cover in the demonstration. Additional modules within Avalara. I mentioned exemption certificates. So maintaining, collecting, renewing those exemptions. We have a platform called CertCapture, which integrates directly into AvaTax. And then the returns filing and output process as well. So you can obviously leverage reports out of Avalara to be able to file your own returns, or you can leverage Avalara's outsourced managed returns process. And the way that I typically describe that to clients, most people are familiar with outsourcing payroll, right, to Paychex or ADP, one of these third-party payroll providers. And the way that process works, your payroll manager simply approves payroll, $100,000 of payroll to these employees. They approve that, and that payroll provider deducts those funds and pays each one of the individuals in their bank accounts. Our outsourced managed returns works very similar. We create your filing calendar and roll up all of your tax liability to a single amount. We then deduct those funds. Then we prepare the return, file the return, and pay the return on the state website on your behalf. So these are just a couple of examples of the solutions that Avalara provides. I'm going to pass it now over to Jerry, and he's going to walk into a little bit further about the integration between AvaTax and the Smarter Commerce.
Yeah, hey, Matt, appreciate that introduction. So as Matt mentioned at the beginning of our time together, I'm an account executive representing Smarter Commerce. Diego's going to be joining us in just a minute. I did want to provide a little bit of background information around our connector. Who exactly is Smarter Commerce? What do we bring to the table? We've been partnered with Avalara now for a number of years and have supported dozens of JD Edwards customers in automating their tax compliance through the Avalara AvaTax platform. The way that we've done that is by connecting JD Edwards to AvaTax through our connector. We call it the Smarter Commerce AvaTax connector, and we support a variety of different scenarios from a taxability standpoint, sales tax, use tax, and integrate with a lot of different modules within JD Edwards Enterprise One. So we're really excited to share the connector with your team. We've gone through the Oracle validated integration process. We have a system code that was awarded to us by Oracle so that when we install our connector, we know it's going to work really well with your JD Edwards environment. So with that said, I'll go ahead and transition to Diego, and he'll walk us through some of the scenarios that Matt sort of set up in the last couple of minutes here.
Thank you, Jerry. Matt, if I can get permission to share my screen. Thank you. All right. Well, hello to everyone on the webinar, and my name is Diego Fernandez, as Jerry mentioned, and I've been doing JD Edwards now for about 25 years, mainly focused on the order to cash process. So what I'm going to be doing today is to show you the integration between the sales order process and the Avalara AvaTax APIs. The AvaTax calculation engine is a cloud-based engine, so you completely can get out of maintaining tax tables or updating any information within JD Edwards in order to maintain yourself up to date with all the various states and regulations that are required. By doing this, integrating your JD Edwards into Avalara, everything is automatic, and your accuracy of information, we pass in all of the address information and all the information required in order to do a calculation of the exact tax that is required for that specific destination. So for this presentation, I'm going to begin with an order to cash processes, as I mentioned, and I prepared here a sample menu walking through the various steps of the order to cash, obviously from order entry, typically done by a salesperson or customer service entry person. We'll then walk over to obviously the warehouse. We're going to pick some product and ship it. And then we'll print invoices and do the sales update within your JD Edwards environment, and then complete the process. And then we'll go over and look at this transaction within the Avalara system and the administrative console of Avalara from a reporting and transactional history purpose. So let's go ahead and begin with a simple transaction here, entering in a sales order. Again, this is your standard JD Edwards order entry, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. I've gone ahead and entered my customer information. I've gone ahead and entered the PO number that they've provided me. And then I'll go ahead and go to the second step in the order entry process, which is enter in the products that customer is desiring to purchase, including the quantities. Once I've entered in all of the line items of the order for that customer, you have the option within the order entry application of JD Edwards here on the order summary tab to look at a complete summary of and order totals up to the moment of the order entry. And you'll notice here within the order summary that we're getting a sales tax number and sales tax rate. This is through the integration out to the Avalara APIs that then we pass in all of the relevant information. What is that relevant information? Well, the source address from where this product is being shipped from, the destination address of where this product is being delivered to, along with all of the product information, including product numbers, including pricing, and customer information, so that Avalara can then accurately calculate the exact tax and rate and provide that back to JD Edwards. As you can see, it's instantaneous. This is doing a call out from JD Edwards out to the cloud-based tax calculation engine and returning an immediate response, so that your user can then provide the totals that are expected to be paid by the customer. In this case, the order totals plus any sales tax that has been calculated. Now, as you know, within your JD Edwards environment, at the moment of order entry, sales tax is just a temporary calculation. The actual sales tax calculation from a permanent reporting basis is done at invoicing and sales update. So throughout the JD Edwards process, up to invoicing and sales update, we're just calculating sales tax for a display and temporary basis, and it's at invoice and sales update that we're recording it for all reporting purposes. And that is how JD Edwards works for the JD Edwards order to cash process. So now that I've entered a sales order, and I'm going to go ahead and submit and close and save my sales order into JD Edwards. And we can go back here and inquire on the sales order that we just entered. It's order number 8114, and we're going to walk this order through the process to the end so that we can see the various steps and how sales tax is being calculated at the various steps of the process. As you know from sales order inquiry, right from here, I can go out to what's called online invoice. And again, it will go ahead and calculate out the sales tax information. So now that I have my order in and I'm at status 540, which in my demonstration environment means order picking, I'm going to go ahead and run the next step in my process, which is pick slip generation for my warehouse operation. So we'll go ahead and do that now and run our pick slips. And then we can go ahead and look at our pick slip presentation. This is again using standard JD Edwards reports and applications that already include as part of the foundation of JD Edwards. Obviously, many customers modify their pick slip or modify their invoice print or their sales order entry applications, and that's okay. We work with you to make sure that the integration is placed in the correct spots so that your current version of your JD Edwards and your enhanced version of your JD Edwards work seamlessly with the AvaTax API calls. All right, well, let's look at the pick slip that comes out of JD Edwards here real quick. As you can see, we have the pick slip report that JD Edwards generates. This is the standard pick slip, and then down below is the sales tax calculation from a presentation standpoint. All right, now that we've done that, we're going to go ahead and return back to JD Edwards here and continue the process. Typically, after your warehouse picks the product, it goes ahead and confirms shipment, and we'll walk that order through confirm shipment now. Here is our order, and as part of shipment confirmation, most JD Edwards customers add in some additional cost lines, normally for handling and delivery fees or freight to that order. I know a lot of customers use third-party solutions to do that and insert additional cost lines to the order so that freight can be added or handling fees can be added to process that order. And we're gonna do that similar operation using the standard JD Edwards order confirmation application here. So I've gone ahead and confirmed the products, and I'm going to go ahead and add in some additional costs for freight and handling of the product back into the order to be considered as an additional line item on the order. So now we've confirmed our order. If we go back to our customer service inquiry screen and we refresh our order here, we can see that we now have a third line in our order as moved along to the next status in the order flow, which in this case is invoice printing. And it's at this point in the process that we recalculate our sales tax, but this time we're going to calculate it in a permanent basis because through invoice printing and sales update, we will then go ahead and calculate it on a permanent basis and then post it into Avalara for reporting back to the various states. So let's go ahead and do that. And we'll go ahead and run the invoice print. This again is the standard JD Edwards invoice print report. And we'll give this a moment to complete here. It's executing now. And now that it's complete, we can go in and look at the actual physical printed invoice that is generated out of JD Edwards. Here is the invoice that you normally get out of JD Edwards. There's our order number that we've been working with, the invoice number that's been assigned, 5907. And down below are the various line items associated to the products, and including the freight line that has been added to this for freight and handling. And then towards the bottom, you now see the sales tax that has been recalculated. And if you recall earlier, our sales tax was somewhere in the neighborhood of $48 or $49. But in this case, this state that we're shipping to, freight is taxable. And all of that is calculated automatically by Avalara and the cloud-based tax engine. You don't have to worry about that. Is freight taxable in this state? Is it based on the products that I'm shipping? Is it non-taxable? We pass all of the information in, like I said earlier, the actual address where it's being originated from, the destination address, all of the product lines, and all of the information related to the order so that Avalara can accurately calculate the exact amount and return that for presentation purposes and recording purposes into your JD Edwards. So now that we've done that and we've gone ahead and run our pick slips and we've run our invoice print out of Avalara, I'll just go ahead and do the final step here, the posting of sales. which then posts the transaction into the Avalara system, completing the transaction. And then we can go over to Avalara, the administrative console, and see the actual transaction history in the administrative console. So we'll give it a moment to process. And here is our invoice sales update report. And as you can see here, here's the breakdown of the various line items that are being posted into your general ledger, your sales operations, some discounts. And here is the tax line. The beauty of our solution is that we leverage all of the functionality of JD Edwards. You don't need to do anything special, as you can see. We leverage all of the AAIs and the capabilities that JD Edwards utilizes. We present tax exactly how it's to be presented on JD Edwards screens or reports or within your accounting and posting. All of the JD Edwards capabilities are the same. The beauty is that we use an accurate cloud-based taxing engine, Avalara, passing it all of the relevant information so that it can return an accurate, exact tax calculation and to be recorded back into Edwards and presented for filing purposes. So as you can see, for those of you on this webinar that are familiar, very familiar with JD Edwards, there's nothing special you need to do from a user perspective. All of the same capabilities are the same. We're just replacing the tax engine that's found within Edwards that has to be maintained manually and updated manually consistently with a cloud-based tax engine that is maintained automatically for you, up to date every month, every day. All right, so now we've posted our transactions into Edwards. We've created our sales orders. We've calculated all of that. And I want to talk a little bit about the administrative aspect so that you get a full picture. You saw how to the user, it's seamless. They're just working with Edwards. It's doing its calculation. Well, we have obviously within our solution to help your team and others within your JD Edwards organization to make sure that the information that you're providing to your users, community, your customers, the calculations are always accurate. So we maintain all of the historical call outs to the Avalara APIs, what information is being passed in and what information is being returned through our transaction history reporting capabilities so that you can have confidence that all of the data that's being passed in and returned from Avalara is accurate. This is the order we just did. If you recall, at order 8114, here is the invoice we just generated, invoice 5907. And if I scroll to the right, you can see all of the various details that were passed in to the Avalara system and the responses from Avalara so that you can have accurate information. If I drill in to this invoice and see all of the details behind it, we can see the exact addresses from the origin address, the source address, to the exact address for a destination purpose of each of the line items, what are the various products that were passed. All of this is being passed in, including the taxable amounts, the quantities, and if there is special handling of a particular product, because as you know, there's specific tax rules for different types of cost lines that you have within your organization, such as freight and handling. Avalara has a capability of what it calls tax codes. And tax codes are for special handling of cost lines such as freight or maybe services or special products such as medical instrumentation or other things. So if you are in an industry that requires special handling of your products or of your services, not to worry, because Avalara is already prepared for that through what it calls tax codes. And all we need to do, as you can see here, is pass in the correct tax code associated to that service or product so that it can calculate accurately that tax on that specific line item. So obviously during the implementation, we work with you so that you can associate the appropriate tax codes to the various products that require special handling or the various services that require special handling. So what was I wanting to do with this part of it is to show you how we do that integration, how we pass in all of that relevant information that is needed by Avalara in order to accurately calculate the exact tax from a sales order perspective and from an invoicing perspective back to the JD Edwards system. But Avalara provides you a capability of an administrative console. This is the administrative console that we're working with here in our environment. It is here where you set up all of your various organizations that are taxable entities. It is here that you define your nexus for your various states. All of that is managed through the Avalara administrative console. And it is here also where you can view all of the transactional information for a reporting capability. So if I look at transactions that were done recently, here are some of those transactions. Here is the invoice we just processed just a moment ago. Invoice 5907 RI 0001. This invoice had a tax calculation. It was shipped to the state of Kansas. If I can drill into the details of this invoice, I can see here the purchase order number associated to this. I can see the customer number. Why is this relevant? Well, it's relevant if the customer has an exemption certificate on file, maybe for a particular purchasing contract or an exemption certificate for a particular state. And we'll talk in just a moment about that. Then it can determine automatically whether or not this customer has an exemption that should be applied to these order lines. Down below are the various order lines. Here are all of the details associated to that invoice, all of the details associated to the address where it was shipped from and shipped to. That same information we just saw on the JD Edwards side. As you can see, we pass this into the API that then gets recorded into your administrative console so that all of your record keeping, all of your filings, all can be done from one source of the truth, which is the Avalara admin console. And here it breaks down from a reporting and statutory and nexus state rates, broken down by states and counties and cities and any special jurisdictions that you need to file for, along with the calculated tax on a line-by-line basis, product by product, and any special lines such as freight, where there is special handling, because that is how Avalara knows, okay, this is a freight line or a service line or whatever other type of special handling is required so that I can accurately calculate the tax on this specific line item within the order. So as you can see, the integration is extremely comprehensive so that it allows you to accurately calculate the sales tax that is required on a state by state and jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis, and be able to support all of your tax calculations and reporting back into JD Edwards. But Avalara takes it even further. Obviously, we talked about transactions and the setup of companies and the integration. But as you can see, and as Matt mentioned earlier, you can do all of your filings and returns right from here. You can generate reports to analyze the data and make sure that everything is ready for from a filing perspective. And you can manage all of your exemptions and exemption certificates and customers. Here is a customer that I've set up here in my demonstration environment. This is the JD Edwards customer number, and they have a series of exemption certificates on file. They have one that's valid right now for the state of Georgia and a few that have expired. through here, you can manage all of your exemptions and certificates. You can upload them. You can request customers to go in and manage their exemptions themselves through the certificate management system. But once the exemption is on file and once it's been updated and the information is accurate, then when back in JD Edwards, if I try to put in a sales order for that specific customer, even if I use the exact same products that were taxable for another customer, here, because there's an exemption certificate on file, it automatically exempts the customer. It does not require any tax calculations to be done for this specific customer. So if I jump over here to the order summary tab, we notice that 0 tax has been returned because of that exemption certificate that's on file. And it recognizes that, again, by passing all of the relevant information into the API. Avalara does its tax calculation and returns the response accurately so that I know, okay, an exemption exists on file, no tax is going to be calculated for this specific customer and this specific order for this customer. So as you can see, our integration is extremely comprehensive, covering not only the sales order area, as Jerry mentioned, but we also calculate use tax within the purchasing cycle, and accounts payable cycle. We calculate sales tax within the service and contract billing aspects of JD Edwards, and obviously across all of the miscellaneous invoicing in accounts receivable and other areas of JD Edwards. So this integration allows you to get out of the business of maintaining tax tables, of being responsible for updating and manually updating or putting down updates on a continuous basis. All of that goes away. The integration allows you to utilize the API and the cloud-based tax engine so that you can accurately calculate sales tax at all times. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate you listening in. And at this point, I'm going to stop sharing for some closing comments by Matt Hill.
Great. Thank you very much, Diego and Jerry, for the thoughts and feedback. I appreciate everybody taking the opportunity. I know there's been questions that have come in through the chat. We're happy to answer those questions, and we will do so. But this concludes the webinar. Thank you guys very much for your time today, and everybody else have a great rest of your day. Thanks very much.